At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Hey, it's Joe with 10-Minute Murder. Today's episode is a little bit different. Usually I'm telling you about one killer or a case wrapped up in about 10 minutes. But this time I'm sharing something from the blog over at 10minutemurder.com. It's a deeper dive into a topic that I wrote about that's been getting a lot of attention: the roots and radicalization of Incel ideology. Because it started out as a blog post, I didn't really convert it to a 10-minute episode, so this one's longer than usual. I don't know exactly how long. We'll find out together. So if you're ready for something a little different, let's get into it. The term incel is short for involuntarily celibate. It started decades ago as a simple label for people, mostly men, who were struggling with loneliness and the frustration of not being able to form romantic or sexual relationships. At first, the community was fairly innocuous. It was a place where individuals would commiserate, share their feelings of rejection, and seek some measure of comfort or understanding. The intention was support and solidarity, not necessarily hatred. But as time went on, what began as a space for empathy and connection became a breeding ground for something much darker. The community transformed into a volatile, ideological crucible where bitterness and resentment were the main currencies. The conversation shifted from shared pain to collective grievance. Incels started to see themselves not as just unlucky or shy, but as victims of a rigged system designed to keep them out of the social or sexual hierarchy. This shift brought with it an extreme sense of entitlement and a dangerous narrative about women and society in general. At the heart of this incel ideology lies a powerful sense of collective disenfranchisement, the belief that basic human needs like intimacy and affection are owed to them. It creates a psychological malaise that goes far beyond disappointment. This mindset breeds a toxic resentment, especially toward women, who are often portrayed as cruel gatekeepers of love and sex. It's a worldview steeped in misogyny, where blame is assigned outwardly rather than inwardly. The world becomes the enemy, and the incel community becomes a refuge for this anger. The psychological factors contributing to this mindset are complex and interwoven. Many incels experience profound social isolation, which compounds feelings of nihilism and despair. These emotions feed into a vicious cycle where loneliness breeds more loneliness, and frustration hardens into hostility. The internet serves as both an outlet and an accelerant. Online forums and chat rooms, often shielded by anonymity, create echo chambers that reinforce and magnify these toxic beliefs. In these digital spaces, cognitive distortions are rampant and rarely challenged. The group dynamic transforms personal failures into shared narratives of injustice. Violence and hatred are not only condoned, but sometimes glorified. Manifestos, violent fantasies, and detailed plans are openly discussed, giving the incel community a performative dimension that goes beyond mere venting. The desire for notoriety, infamy, or revenge becomes part of the ideological fabric. This radicalization is fostered by the very architecture of the internet. Algorithms built to maximize user engagement end up funneling vulnerable individuals into more extreme content. What begins as casual browsing can lead to deep immersion in forums and videos that validate and deepen the feelings of grievance and anger. This creates a dangerous feedback loop where individuals become trapped in an escalating spiral of hatred and despair. To truly understand the phenomenon of incel violence, it is crucial to grasp this transformation. It's not simply a story about lonely men or failed relationships. It's a complex interplay of psychological malaise, social isolation, cultural pressures, and technological amplification. Together, these forces create a volatile mixture that can, and has, exploded into tragic, real-world violence. It's one thing to feel isolated, angry, or bitter. It's a completely different beast when those feelings turn into plans to kill. For some incels, the journey from resentment to violence follows a disturbing, yet disturbingly predictable path. Violence, in this context, is often preceded by a spiral of cognitive and emotional decline. The narrative shifts from, "Why am I lonely?" to, "I deserve this," to, "I will take it." There's a growing conviction that the world has wronged them so profoundly that retaliation is not only justified, but necessary. This sense of righteous indignation can be intoxicating, fueling a dangerous escalation. One of the hallmarks of incel-related violence is the creation and distribution of manifestos or lengthy online posts. These documents serve multiple purposes. They justify the violence, explain the grievances, and broadcast intentions to a wider audience. They transform private rage into public spectacle. For many perpetrators, this is about legacy, a way to etch their frustrations into history, no matter how infamously. This performative aspect cannot be overstated. The killers seek not only to punish, but to be seen, to be acknowledged. In a society where they have felt invisible or dismissed, violence becomes a grotesque form of self-expression. Social media and video sharing platforms amplify this effect, turning murderers into, if not heroes, then figures of infamy within their communities. At the roots of these acts lies a toxic combination of entitlement and alienation. Incels often believe that they are owed companionship and respect simply for existing, and when denied, the denial is seen as a personal attack or systemic injustice. The sense of grievance is exacerbated by cultural expectations around masculinity. Society pressures men to be dominant, to be successful, and sexually active, and failure to meet these expectations can cause a profound identity crisis. These pressures, when combined with mental health struggles and social isolation, create fertile ground for violent outcomes. It's a potential cocktail that mixes internal pain with external blame, a cocktail too many sip with deadly consequences. Understanding this escalation is crucial if we hope to prevent future tragedies. It's not enough to label these killers as monsters without seeing the patterns, the warning signs, and the social factors that contribute to their radicalization. The anatomy of incel violence is a roadmap, grim but necessary for those who want to intervene before rage turns lethal. When discussing the violent extremes of incel ideology, a few notorious cases dominate the conversation. These murderers are seared into public consciousness, not only because of their brutality, but because they seem to crystallize the deadly consequences of toxic entitlement and online radicalization. Understanding these cases in depth reveals unsettling patterns and nuances that go beyond headlines and sound bites. Elliot Rodger is often considered the grim prototype of incel-related violence. On May 23, 2014, Rodger killed 6 people and injured 14 others before taking his own life in the college town of Isla Vista. What set Rodger apart was not just the violence, but the detailed manifesto he left behind, a sprawling document and a series of videos in which he explained his worldview. Rodger's manifesto reads like a textbook case of pathological narcissism mixed with deep-seated misogyny. He portrayed himself as a victim of an unfair social order, a world where women, especially those he desired, denied him affection and respect. This sense of grievance wasn't a quiet lament. It was an aggressive indictment of a society that, in his view, rewarded Chads and Stacys, slang terms and incel culture for attractive men and women who supposedly exclude men like him. What makes Rodger's case significant is the combination of his social isolation, mental health issues, and an obsessive sense of entitlement that escalated into lethal violence. His rampage was, in his own words, a form of revenge and an attempt to assert control in a life where he felt powerless. The media coverage that followed often painted him as the quintessential angry loner, but his story reveals much more. A toxic mix of cultural messages about masculinity, rejection, and violence. Rodger's case also highlighted the power of online spaces to radicalize. His videos and writings were shared widely in incel forums where they became kind of a manifesto for others who felt similarly disenfranchised. His rampage wasn't just a personal tragedy, but a signal flare for a subculture steeped in resentment. 4 years later, Alek Minassian would bring incel violence to an even more public stage. On April 23, 2018, Minassian drove a rented van into pedestrians in Toronto, killing 10 people and injuring 16. What made this attack chilling beyond the scale was Minassian's explicit invocation of incel ideology. Minutes before the attack, Minassian posted a cryptic message on Facebook referencing the Incel Rebellion and praised Elliot Rodger as a saint. Unlike Rodger, whose attack seemed motivated largely by personal grievances, Minassian's was more ideological, a calculated act of terror meant to symbolize a wider revolt. Minassian's case is a stark example of how incel ideology can evolve from isolated resentment into organized and performative violence. He embraced the label of incel as part of an identity and cause, turning his attack into a statement meant to inspire others. The van attack shook Canada and sent ripples around the world, forcing society to confront incel violence as a distinct threat. Chris Harper Mercer's 2015 shooting at Umpqua Community College in Oregon is often debated in the context of incel violence. Harper Mercer killed 9 people and wounded 9 others before dying in a shootout with police. While his connections to the incel community are less overt, his online writings and behavior reflected many incel themes. Harper Mercer's journals expressed deep frustration with social rejection, loneliness, and hostility toward women, echoing incel rhetoric about entitlement and grievance. However, his motivations seem to overlap with broader issues of alienation and mental illness, blurring the lines between incel ideology and other forms of violent nihilism. This case underscores the difficulty of neatly categorizing violence driven by complex psychological and social factors. While Harper Mercer may not have explicitly identified as an incel, his actions and worldview fit into the same dark pattern of isolated young men lashing out violently. Beyond these high-profile examples, there have been numerous other cases where incel rhetoric or ideology appears as a factor in violent acts. From lesser-known shootings to assaults and attempted attacks, incel-related violence is not confined to a handful of infamous events. Many perpetrators share similar profiles: young men, socially marginalized, often with histories of mental health struggles or traumatic experiences. Their violence is frequently preceded by online activity steeped in grievance and hostility, including manifestos, forum posts, or videos expressing entitlement, anger, and misogyny. These incidents form a constellation of atavistic violence, primitive, regressive acts fueled by pathological narcissism and a delusional sense of a manifest destiny of male entitlement. They reveal a cultural failure to address deep social and psychological problems and a technological failure to curtail radicalization. Several patterns emerge when analyzing these cases side by side. Age and demographics. Most perpetrators are young, in their late teens to early 30s, a demographic often grappling with identity and social pressures. Social isolation. A common thread is profound loneliness or marginalization, whether self-imposed or circumstantial. Mental health. Many had documented or suspected mental health issues, from depression to personality disorders. Entitlement and resentment. A toxic belief that society owes them something they have not received, particularly in relationships. Online radicalization. Forums, videos, and manifestos serve as echo chambers, reinforcing harmful beliefs and sometimes inciting violence. These factors converge in a combustible mix that society has struggled to understand or address effectively. The media's tendency to sensationalize these killers can inadvertently glorify them, offering a twisted form of validation to those who identify with them. Understanding these cases in depth reveals that incel violence is not simply about lonely guys gone bad. It's a reflection of broader cultural dynamics, how masculinity, mental health, social isolation, and digital technology intersect with lethal consequences. The internet promised connection, but often delivers something far more insidious for vulnerable minds. For many incels, online spaces act as a digital fertilizer, accelerating and cultivating the poisonous ideology that festers online. Anonymous forums, message boards, and chat rooms provide a sanctuary where isolated individuals can find others who echo their grievances. These communities, shielded from outside scrutiny, quickly become echo chambers where toxic ideas bounce around unchecked and sometimes amplified. What might have been a private frustration, it transformed into collective anger and, in some cases, outright hatred. Algorithms on social media platforms and video sites play an unintentional but significant role. Designed to maximize engagement, these algorithms often lead users down radicalization rabbit holes. Watching one video about rejection or social failure can quickly spiral into hours of content steeped in misogyny, conspiracy theories, and violent rhetoric. This relentless cycle nurtures ideological extremism by rewarding provocative and inflammatory content. The paradox is that the internet simultaneously connects and isolates. It creates communities but fosters segregation. Individuals find belonging in toxic groups precisely because they feel alienated from mainstream society. This sense of belonging, however fraught, can be a powerful force that deepens commitment to extremist beliefs. Content moderation efforts face a Sisyphean challenge. The sheer volume of online material, combined with the use of coded language and memes, makes identifying and curtailing harmful incel content difficult. Platforms struggle to balance free speech concerns with the imperative to protect users from radicalization and harm. Law enforcement and mental health professionals also grapple with the digital dimension. Online activity can offer warning signs, but also complicates intervention efforts. The decentralized and anonymous nature of these communities hinders monitoring and preventative outreach. Ultimately, the internet acts as both a mirror and a magnifier of societal issues, reflecting loneliness, resentment, and cultural pressures, while amplifying the worst impulses. Addressing incel violence requires confronting this digital reality head-on, with innovative solutions that blend technology, policy, and human understanding. The rise of incel-related violence has forced society to reckon with uncomfortable questions about masculinity, mental health, and how we talk about both in public and private spheres. The fallout stretches far beyond the headlines of brutal shootings and manifestos. First, public perception of incels often swings between two extremes. On one side, there's the tendency to dismiss them as just angry losers, minimizing the threat. On the other, some media and social narratives risk sensationalizing or even inadvertently glorifying these perpetrators, granting them the notoriety they crave. Both extremes are dangerous. The former ignores the real risk. The latter feeds the ideology's allure. Media coverage often struggles to balance reporting facts with the risk of amplifying violent rhetoric. When killers like Elliot Rodger or Alek Minassian become household names, their manifestos and motives spread widely, sometimes sparking copycat behavior or increasing recruitment to these toxic communities. At the heart of this issue lies a cultural crisis about masculinity. Traditional ideals pressure men to be dominant, successful, and sexually active. Failure to meet these often unrealistic standards can lead to profound identity crisis and feelings of emasculation. For some, incel ideology offers a twisted explanation and outlet for these frustrations, blaming women and a society rather than addressing underlying struggles. Mental health stigma compounds the problem. Many incels suffer in silence, hesitant or unable to speak up. Systems meant to provide support are often ill-equipped to identify or treat the complex blend of social isolation, entitlement, and misogyny that defines incel rage. There's also a broader societal failure to address the root causes: loneliness, social fragmentation, and the alienation wrought by rapid technological change. These problems are not unique to incels, but are symptoms of a society struggling to keep its members connected and understood. Simplistic narratives that reduce incel violence to mere man-babies or toxic men miss the complexity and hinder effective intervention. The conversation must shift to a nuanced understanding that respects victims, acknowledges perpetrators' humanity without excusing violence, and confronts the systemic issues at play. Addressing incel-related violence requires a multifaceted approach. There is no silver bullet. The problem is tangled in mental health, cultural expectations, online ecosystems, and systemic gaps. On the mental health front, expanding access and reducing stigma is essential. Many incels suffer from untreated depression, anxiety, or personality disorders that worsen their sense of isolation and grievance. Early intervention programs tailored to young men who feel socially marginalized could provide critical support before bitterness takes root. Online platforms face a monumental challenge. Content moderation must evolve beyond keyword bans and simplistic algorithms. Platforms need to identify coded language, memes, and communities that act as incubators for extremist thought without infringing on legitimate free speech. Collaboration between tech companies, researchers, and mental health experts can foster more sophisticated detection and intervention strategies. Law enforcement and intelligence agencies are also adapting, but they often face difficulties monitoring decentralized, anonymous groups. Developing partnerships with mental health professionals and community organizations can create early warning networks. Training first responders and educators to recognize signs of radicalization or violent intent is another key piece. Prevention efforts must also engage with the cultural conversation around masculinity and entitlement. Encouraging healthy, nuanced ideas of manhood can counteract the toxic narratives incels embrace. Programs in schools, media campaigns, and community groups that promote emotional literacy, respect, and empathy could chip away at the cultural underpinnings of this violence. Finally, empathy is crucial. This does not mean excusing violence, but understanding that many perpetrators are deeply broken individuals. Dehumanizing them blinds society to opportunities for prevention and healing. A balance must be struck between holding individuals accountable and addressing the societal failures that incubate their rage. In the end, preventing incel violence is a complex, ongoing effort requiring vigilance, compassion, and innovation. It demands that society confront uncomfortable truths about loneliness, masculinity, and the digital age while refusing to let hate define the future. The violent outbursts linked to incel ideology are more than isolated tragedies. They are a symptom of a tangled web where social isolation, entitlement, and online radicalization intersect with broader cultural and psychological forces. These killers are not just lonely guys, but the product of systemic failures. Failures in mental health care and how society shapes masculinity, and in the very platforms that connect us. Understanding this complex landscape is uncomfortable, but necessary. It means acknowledging the human cost without excusing the violence. It means seeing beyond the headlines and manifestos to the deeper wounds that fester beneath. And it means confronting a culture that too often dismisses or stigmatizes those who struggle, instead of offering pathways to healing. The incel phenomenon is a warning flare, one that demands vigilance, empathy, and action. It challenges us to rethink connection, responsibility, and how we foster belonging in an increasingly fractured world. Breaking the cycle will not be easy or quick, but it is essential, because at stake is not just preventing violence, but reclaiming a society where no one feels so invisible and enraged that they turn to murder as their voice.